So I want to start by telling you a story from 2,600 years ago when the Buddha first spoke of and taught about metta. It's an old story, but there's so much within it that feels relevant to us today. Traditionally, Buddhist monks retreat for 3 months each year to practice meditation. And even today at IMS and other places, this tradition is upheld each fall. And in this story, 500 monks were retreating deep into the forest to practice. And they picked this particular place because the local villagers welcomed them and offered to provide them food during their time there. Excuse me. However, the forest devas, those unseen energies and spirits that resided in the forest, they became perturbed with the monks' extended presence and started to create scary noises and scary sights and even really unpleasant odors in order to discourage the monks from staying. The monks who were trying to practice became terrified, and they lost their concentration and felt like it was impossible to continue their retreat. So they went to the Buddha, begging him to find them a different place to practice. They said that it was so scary in the forest and that they felt defenseless. And the Buddha responded by offering what he called the greatest protection, and then for the first time offered the Metta Sutta. So out of respect for the Buddha, the monks returned to the forest and really earnestly practiced metta. And things didn't change immediately, and the monks still felt fear. But over time, they felt the power of metta for themselves, and the devas also felt the power of metta. The devas' anger and resentment faded, and they actually began to feel some respect for the monks. They began to feel like family, and they created an environment of safety in which the monks could practice. So it's said that many of the monks were able to practice metta and vipassana and became enlightened on this retreat. So the Buddha offered metta as the greatest protection, a protection from fear, internally and externally, and as an offer of safety, not by avoiding what was fearful, not by going somewhere else to meditate, but within the circumstances that the monks found themselves in. I love this. What a promise. And I also hear in this story what's called out from within the monks, a deep courage to turn towards those things that scared them and that made them feel vulnerable, and to meet them with warmth and care, staying steady. And in practicing this over the months of the retreat, the entire experience was transformed. Not only were the monks able to quiet and see clearly, but the devas also were able to be changed by the power of metta. So here we are, 2,600 years later, and metta has the same potential power to change our own hearts and minds, and in so doing this, making a difference to others. It really can help us to overcome our fear and find a place of safety within our vulnerability, and help us to be a bit more compassionate with another's fear. I can so relate to those monks in the forest. I know what fear feels like. My anxieties are a fear that's internalized and mostly They're focused on thoughts about who I think I am, who I should be, what might happen in the future, what happened in the past. I imagine that this kind of thinking is familiar to all of us in greater or lesser degrees, and it doesn't feel good. And often I try to resist it or stuff it in some way. And when I'm out in the world, fear also comes up. When I see or feel the aggression of another person, especially when it's directed at me, I have a tendency to cower in the face of it. And when I have to put myself in a situation where others can see me, like public speaking, I feel a little vulnerable. And I have a tendency to make myself small and unseen. So maybe I can get through this moment under the radar. Other people manifest their fear really differently. I have a friend who becomes quite aggressive when he's scared and feels threatened. He lashes out at others. He insults them and pushes them away. Outwardly, it looks different from how I react, but the underlying fear, I think, is similar. So imagine those 500 monks all feeling afraid, each manifesting it in different ways. Some withdrawing and hiding, others falling into despair, others lashing out at the devas or at each other, being really aggressive, all isolating themselves one from another. So what a hard environment to practice in. Feelings of fear seem to be universal. They're experienced across cultures, ages, backgrounds. I think of it as a response to the vulnerability that's inherent in our lives. And some of that vulnerability is real, and our fear is healthy. It's really a good reminder to keep ourselves safe by driving slowly or staying out of the water when it's lightning. But much of our fear is rooted in a sense of vulnerability and the threats we perceive to our sense of self and ego. And when we can't sit with that because it's so uncomfortable, we can't see situations clearly and we become reactive. We defend, we lash out, or we withdraw. And acting from this place, it does create a sense of separation. It creates an us and a them, a me and the rest of the world. It's such a basis for isolating ourselves, and it denies how connected we really are, how we are all in this life together. This is true, I think, for us as individuals and collectively. Much of the aggression of the world is playing out this dynamic based in fear. And in this story, the Buddha is saying that Metta has the power to protect us, to offer safety to ourselves in the midst of our vulnerability and fear. So we may not act out reactively. So we may see and feel how connected we really are. And what a promise that is. Metta's attitude of warmth towards all experience and all beings is such a strong antidote to the isolation and the separation that arises out of fear. Catherine and Lori both spoke so beautifully last week about how metta practice supports creating relationships with all parts of ourselves and with others. It doesn't always come easily or quickly. It's taken many years of practice for me to find a way to sit alongside my fear, to befriend it, to not be so fearful of it. And the practice has changed me, and it's allowed a greater sense of safety to arise in my life. So just for a moment, think what safety feels like in your body and your mind. The gift of safety. It can open us from constriction. It can bring more ease and space. And it helps us to see things more clearly. It is transformative. The monks' practice in the forest transformed them so much that many became enlightened. And their practice also transformed the devas. It disarmed them when they realized that the monks were not aggressively trying to take over the forest. And then the devas began to care for the monks, from separateness to connection and relationship. In my own practice, I'm trying to expand my sphere of metta, to push the edges of my heart's capacity to hold. I know we can never spend too much time on offering metta to ourselves and finding the caring place where we can hold all parts of ourselves. But it's also important for me in moments to push the edges and explore, how do I offer it to others? Especially to those that I find challenging and maybe I don't even like. How do I authentically offer metta to those people? So I've been experimenting. And I'll tell you, I find it hard to wish happiness and peacefulness to some people. Because if I'm really honest, I'm not sure I really feel that. But when I say, may you be safe and protected from inner and outer harm, something begins to open in me. I can feel the beginnings of a sense of warmth and connection in our humanness. And maybe it's just for a moment, but it's a start. Getting to really know the deep pain of fear and vulnerability in myself has allowed me to understand the same feelings in others. And that makes it easier to wish another safety and protection. We don't have to go very far to find examples where this can make a difference. How different would the world be if we weren't acting out of fear, if we weren't creating separation, but feeling and recognizing our connection to each other, to other sentient beings, to the planet? It takes courage to turn towards our fears. It took courage for those monks to return to the woods, to sit with the devas and all that was unsettled in their minds. And it takes courage for us today to befriend our deepest fears. So maybe we can imagine that the Buddha is giving us the same instruction as he gave the monks, that metta is the greatest protection. So that's our invitation today. Thank you for listening. And now let's turn our attention towards our practice. And first, bringing attention to this body. that allows us to be here in this life and offer it what you feel it needs. How can you offer just a bit more ease to your physical presence? And take all the time you need. There's no rushing. And at your own pace, coming into a place of relative stillness, finding a posture that is comfortable for you, that allows you to feel both alert and relaxed. And perhaps with a deeper than normal breath, let that exhale lead you into a sense of settling in, settling back. Finding your way into this moment. Inviting your mind to let go of everything you brought in this morning, and also let go of all that comes next. And allow yourself to really arrive into what is arising for you right now. Whatever it is. Allow it the space to arise and naturally pass away within your field of awareness. It is in this moment to moment passing of experience that your life is experienced. So bringing a sense of interest and warmth and engagement to your attention. What is it to welcome everything with no resistance? And for yourself, is there a sense of safety in that? What does that feel like? I apologize for that loud bell. Still haven't gotten that quite down. Anyways.